Thanks. Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Happy Bank Holiday. Last year I brought a book out called Utter Folly, and there are some copies of it, signed copies for sale at the back there. But just for you, just tonight, until tomorrow at midnight, the e-book version on Amazon has been reduced to 99p. So take advantage of this amazing bank. And if you bought a cut price sofa today, it's bank holiday, you can now have something to read on it. Right, I'm now going to read from my next novel, which is called Dead Writers in Rehab. It's because people ask you that question when you write. You all know this when you're writers. They say, what's your book about? They don't really want to know. It's like people say, how are you? They're not interested. It's their doctor and it's just their job. So I thought I might be able to just... These people still say, what's it about? And I give up. It's like snakes on a plane, you know. Okay, this is the beginning of it. And then if people say, oh, it's got snakes in it, and then I really do think I cut my losses. Because those people probably don't read a lot. Okay, this is, in fact, the first chapter, but it's a very short first chapter. I know why the caged bird sings, but the pigeon outside my room at 4 in the morning? What the fuck is his problem? Wait, outside what room? And how do I know it's 4 in the morning? All I really know is that it's very dark. If I could have a blowjob for every time I'd woken up without a clue where I was, I'd be on a tight schedule. Sometimes I've woken up and had the blowjob there and then, or even been woken up by it, which is a nice way to begin the process of finding out where you are and who you're with and what happened last night. It's usually nice anyway, although I woke up once to find myself being expertly filleted by a head that felt, as I began to caress it encouragingly, a bit lumpy. I squinted down and saw a few strands of greasy grey hair plastered over a scabby, flaky scalp. A flicker of memory. Dancing under Waterloo Bridge. Homeless people. Then it all came back. It's amazing how much goodwill you can generate among a group of elderly derelicts if you arrive at their cardboard campfire with 2 bottles of vodka in the early hours of the morning. You can really cheer them up. And now, as dawn chilled the air, one of them was showing their gratitude in the only way available to her. Or possibly him. God help me, I didn't want to know how much worse this could be. I swatted the scaly head away from my groin, staggered to my feet, nearly fell down again under the impact of a tremendous hammering headache and ran away. No blowjob today, just darkness. Maybe I'd gone blind, which had happened before. Sometimes I just assumed I'd gone blind when there was another reason why I couldn't see anything. On one occasion, several years ago, I opened my eyes to what seemed like darkness, but was in fact a light so bright that it was black. After a moment, I realised I was lying on my back in a field looking up into the sun. Birds were singing, and the meadow around me smelled sweet. I stood up carefully, checking for broken glass, and looked around. It was a lovely midsummer day somewhere in England. I was wearing a white tuxedo and a pink bow tie. I appeared to be completely alone in open, rolling countryside. I set off through wild grass that swished gently at my knees. I knew I was about to undergo a brutal transformation as my senses came to their senses. Sure enough, a thundering brandy and cocaine hangover, one of the meanest of the tribe, erupted inside me like an enraged alien fetus. Once the pain had settled down to an agonising throb, data began to assemble itself. I'd been at a wedding reception in the grounds of a big manor house that was presumably not far away, tucked into the undulating landscape. It was my agent's wedding. He was a Canadian, surfing the new alternative comedy boom by helping some of the performers understand that they could make a lot of money from a cheap book and still be terrifically alternative. He'd just married the woman he'd been living with for a while. She was a nice, sensible type, attractive enough, but not as sexy as his personal assistant, who wasn't a sensible type. She was the one he did drugs with and fucked in hotels when they went to literary festivals together. But he was an ambitious player in a fundamentally conservative industry, and when it came to getting married, it was no contest. The sexy assistant spent half the party in tears, and the other half with me, doing coke in various places, the last of which was an elaborate temporary structure housing the women's toilets. Like everything else at this wedding reception, it was the best that money could buy, and it was cleaner and more attractive than many of the flats I'd lived in. We ended up in one of the cubicles where she decided it was time for us to fulfil the sexual promise that had always simmered between us, despite her being in love with her boss. We were just getting into it when she changed her mind and decided that one more good, loud session of hysterical crying would do the trick for her. A guy we both knew was passing the toilets and heard her. He came in and found us half-dressed, me trying to do up my clothes, hers in disarray as she sank to the ground, howling with what the guy, who'd always fancied her himself, chose to interpret as trauma caused by my unwelcome sexual advances. I didn't remember much after that, except for some shouting. In the morning, as I trudged through that field, I wondered what would happen when I got back to London. Nothing much, as it turned out. For a while, I got a few more pitying looks than usual, but at that stage, I was pretty much immune to anything more nuanced than a punch in the face. Why was I now thinking about that incident from 20 years ago? I have a tendency to relate everything that happens to me to some specific disaster in the past. My third book was called Everything Reminds Me of Something Bad. It had been inspired by an experience I was having at the time with meat. I still have it. I always line my grill pan with tin foil, and certain types of meat, especially lamb chops, produce a cloudy yellow fat that pools on the tin foil in a way that reminds me of how freebase cocaine and heroin, if it's pure enough, will liquefy when you chase it down a strip of foil with a lighter underneath it. For 2 or 3 years after I'd given up drugs for the final time, the trigger was so powerful that I had to call my sponsor at NA. After a while, he got used to it, and if I called him any time after 6 in the evening, he'd pick up the phone and ask me how the lamb chops were doing. Triggers. There's always something. And now I thought I knew why the memory of that wedding reception had been playing out in my mind so vividly. Even though I was still in the dark, literally and metaphorically, I was convinced that whatever room or space or place I'd woken up in was somewhere in the countryside. That pigeon outside wasn't a pigeon. It was a dove. Thank you.